But the Crimson Secret. The village of Redgrove was the kind of place where secrets were buried deep beneath the earth. Like the roots of the ancient oak tree in the center of town, the residents lived quiet, unassuming lives, but the air was thick with unspoken dread. It was a dread that slithered through the streets like a snake, its venom infecting the hearts of every man, woman, and child who called Redgrove home. I arrived in Redgrove under the guise of a writer seeking inspiration for my next novel. Nobody needed to know that I was a criminal investigator specializing in the occult, and that I was there to probe the sinister events that had the villagers paralyzed with fear. My cover story was a necessary precaution, for I knew all too well that the darkness I pursued could sense when it was being hunted. As I interviewed the locals, I found them to be a tight-knit and guarded community, unwilling to reveal their secrets to a stranger. Susan confided in me about a dark prophecy that had plagued Redgrove for generations. The prophecy foretold the rise of a malevolent force, the shadow of death, that would bring about the end of days by harnessing the power of the crimson birthmark. It was said that the blood of the marked individuals held the key to unlocking an ancient, unspeakable evil. As the body count rose, I knew that time was of the essence. I enlisted Susan's help, and together we scoured the village of lives, searching for any clue that might help us stop the shadow of death. It was during one of our late-night research sessions that we stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound tome, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and eldritch incantations. The tome revealed that the only way to defeat the shadow of death was to break the curse of the crimson birthmark. This would require a ritual of tremendous power, one that could only be performed by someone who bore the mark themselves. Susan, her eyes filled with determination and desperation, volunteered to perform the ritual. On the night of the full moon, we ventured deep into the haunted forest, armed with the knowledge of the arcane and a flickering hope that we could stop the darkness that threatened to consume Redgrove. As Susan began the ritual, the air grew heavy with an oppressive energy, as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched to its breaking point. With a blood-curdling scream, the shadow of death emerged from the shadows, its twisted form a mockery of the human shape, its eyes, black voice filled with malevolence, bore into our souls as it lunged toward Susan. But she did not waver. As the ancient words poured from her lips, a blinding light erupted from her birthmark, enveloping the shadow of death and banishing it to the abyss. The darkness was defeated, but the victory came at a terrible cost. Susan, her strength spent, crumpled to the ground, her life's flame extinguished. The village of Redgrove was saved, but the weight of their salvation hung heavy on my heart as I left, carrying with me the knowledge of the Crimson Secret and the haunting memory of the woman who had sacrificed everything to save her people. The disappearing act. Avalon, once a thriving city, was now a crumbling ruin of its former glory. The streets were lined with decaying buildings, their windows like hollow, staring out into the void. The people, haggard and weary, shuffled through their days, haunted by the specter of the shadow of death that loomed over them like a storm cloud. My name is Jack Harlow, a washed-up detective with a penchant for the supernatural. I'd come to Avalon to chase the whispers of a story that sounded too strange to be true, but as I walked the cold, unforgiving streets, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the city's fear pressing down on me like a leaden shroud. It wasn't long before I made the acquaintance of Mary, a local waitress with a heart as golden as her hair. She spoke of her missing sister Jane, who had vanished without a trace like so many others. As I listened to her story, I couldn't help but notice the fear that trembled in her voice, as if the very mention of the shadow of death could summon it forth from the darkness. I resolved to help Mary find her sister, and together we began to uncover the chilling truth behind the disappearances. Through countless hours of investigation and interviews with the locals, we discovered that each of the missing individuals had been last seen near a specific alleyway on the outskirts of town. This alley, shrouded in a darkness that seemed to swallow the very light around it, held a secret that would forever change Avalon. As we ventured into the depths of the narrow passage, our flashlights flickering and casting eerie shadows on the walls, we discovered a hidden door that led us into the bowels of the earth. The subterranean labyrinth that awaited us was a place of nightmares. a twisting maze of tunnels and chambers that seemed to defy logic and reason. We stumbled through the darkness, guided only by the faint echoes of distant cries and the morbid curiosity that drove us onward. It was in the heart of the labyrinth that we encountered the shadow of death, a malevolent force that fed on the despair of its victims. It lured them into the maze with promises of untold treasures, only to trap them in an eternal game of cat and mouse. The shadow reveled in their fear, grew stronger with each passing moment. Armed with little more than our wits and a desperate determination to save Jane and the others, Mary and I confronted the entity. In the darkness it seemed to be everywhere, and nowhere at once, a shifting, elusive nightmare that defied comprehension. But as we stumbled through the labyrinth, we discovered an ancient ritual etched into the walls, a ritual that held the key to defeating the shadow of death. With the combined power of our faith and the arcane knowledge of the ritual, we managed to trap the shadow of death, severing its connection to the physical world and banishing it back to the void from whence it came. The labyrinth crumbled around us and we barely escaped with our lives. The people of Avalon were saved, and the missing individuals, including Jane, were returned to their loved ones, but the memory of the horrors we had faced lingered like a stain on our souls, a constant reminder that the darkness we had vanquished was never truly gone, only waiting for another chance to rise again. The haunting at Blackwood Manor. The small town of Blackthorn was a place where shadows seemed to gather, drawn by the dark history that stained its very foundations. At the heart of this town stood Blackwood Manor, a once grand estate now reduced to a crumbling monument to the sins of the past. It was a place where the line between the living and the dead was blurred, where the shadow of death held sway over the souls of the damned. My name is Alice Hargrove, an investigator of the paranormal with a heart hardened by years of confronting the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of our world. I'd come to Blackthorn in search of the truth behind the haunting of Blackwood Manor, driven by a desire to lay the restless spirits to rest and break the grip of fear that held the town in its cold embrace. As I stepped across the threshold of the abandoned mansion, I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me like a leaden shroud. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the whispered echoes of long-forgotten memories. It was a place that seemed to exist outside of time, suspended in an eternal moment of sorrow and pain. I began to explore the dark corners of the manor, each room a chilling testament to the lives that had been lost within its walls. It was here, amidst the dust and the shadows, that I discovered the horrifying truth behind the shadow of death. It was not a single entity, but a collection of restless spirits, bound together by the tragic circumstances of their deaths and condemned to an eternity of torment. As I delved deeper into the darkness, I was confronted by the tortured souls that made up the shadow of death. Each spirit had its own story to tell, a tale of heartbreak and betrayal that had left them trapped in the purgatory of Blackwood Manor. As I listened to their stories, I felt a fire burning within me, a desire to right the wrongs that had been done and free the spirits from their eternal prison. Armed with my newfound knowledge and a steely resolve, I set out to break the curse that had bound the spirits to Blackwood Manor. I searched through the town's archives, uncovering the hidden secrets and long-buried truths that had been lost to the passage of time. And with each truth I uncovered, I felt the grip of the shadow of death loosening the chains that had held the spirits captive, slowly unraveling. And as I finally confronted the last of the restless souls, I felt a profound sense of sorrow and loss. These were not malevolent spirits, but the victims of a cruel and unjust world, their only desire to find peace and redemption in the afterlife. With a final act of compassion, I laid the last of the spirits to rest, breaking the curse of Blackwood Manor, freeing the shadow of death from its bonds. As I left the manor, I could feel a sense of lightness in the air, as if the darkness that had once shrouded the town had been lifted. The people of Blackthorn went about their lives, free from the shadow of fear that had once haunted their every step. And as for me, I continued my journey into the unknown, guided by the knowledge that even in the darkest of places, there is always hope to be found. The midnight caller. Nestled in the heart of a forgotten valley, the town of Whispering Hollow was a place where time seemed to stand still. The residents, descendants of the original settlers, clung to their old ways and superstitions like a shipwrecked sailor clinging to a raft. It was here that I found myself, drawn to the town by whispers of a dark curse that held the townspeople in the grip of fear. My name is Eleanor Carter, a folklorist with a fascination for the macabre. I had traveled to Whispering Hollow to document the strange phenomenon known as the Midnight Caller. As I settled into the old inn, the unease in the air was palpable, like an unseen fog that clung to the very fabric of the town. I spent my days interviewing the townspeople, each of them recounting their chilling encounter with the Midnight Caller. As I listened to their stories, I could feel the icy tendrils of fear wrapping around my own heart. But I was determined to uncover the truth and put an end to the terror that haunted Whispering Hollow. As midnight approached on the third night of my stay, I ventured out into the moonlit streets, armed with little more than my trusty notepad and a stubborn determination to confront the Midnight Caller. The town was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the distant howling of a lone wolf. As the clock struck midnight, the mournful wail of the Midnight Caller through the night, its source seeming to come from the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. I followed the haunting sound, my heart pounding in my chest like a wild animal desperate to escape its cage. I arrived at the ancient crypt, its crumbling stone facade barely visible in the pale moonlight. The voice, now a whispered chant, emanated from within the cold, dark tomb. With a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside, determined to face whatever horrors awaited me. In the center of the crypt, I found the source of the voice, the shadow of death, a malevolent entity that had once been a man, twisted and corrupted by the darkness that had consumed his soul. As I stared into its hollow eyes, I could feel the icy grip of fear tightening around my heart, but I refused to let it break me. I had spent countless hours poring over town's archives, searching for any clue that might help me banish the evil that plagued Whispering Hollow. I had discovered an ancient incantation, a forgotten rite that had the power to break the curse and release the shadow of death from its torment. Summoning all of my courage, I began to recite the incantation, my voice steady and unwavering even as the shadow of death lunged toward me. As the last syllable left my lips, a blinding light filled the crypt, engulfing the entity and banishing it back to the abyss from which it had come. The curse of the Midnight Caller was lifted, and the town of Whispering Hollow breathed a collective sigh of relief. The people went about their lives, forever grateful for the stranger who had saved them from the clutches of darkness. As for me, I returned to my studies, my heart a little heavier but my spirit undaunted. For I knew that there were always more shadows waiting to be vanquished, and more stories waiting to be told. The Unseen Stalker. New Arcadia, a city of shining skyscrapers and endless opportunity, had become a hunting ground for a force beyond human understanding. The streets, once alive with the sounds of laughter and commerce, now echoed with whispers of terror and the cries of the lost. It was here, in this city on the brink of chaos, that I found myself, desperate to solve the mystery that had brought New Arcadia to its knees. My name is Sam Crowley, a former professor of paranormal studies who had traded in the ivy-covered walls of academia for the gritty underbelly of the city. I had come to New Arcadia in search of answers, seeking to unravel the twisted thread of the Unseen Stalker and restore the city to its former glory. As I examined the crime scenes, each more gruesome than the last, I began to see the faintest traces of an ancient supernatural power. The victims, torn apart as if by the claws of an invisible beast, bore the unmistakable signs of a malevolent entity that I came to know as Shadow of Death. I delved into the city's dark history, unearthing ancient texts and forgotten rituals that spoke of a time when the Shadow of Death had been summoned to protect the city, only to turn on its masters and wreak havoc upon the world. It was a power that could not be destroyed, only contained, and I knew that the key to stopping the Unseen Stalker lay in finding a force even more potent than the darkness it wielded. Through countless sleepless nights and desperate searches through the city's hidden archives, I discovered the existence of an artifact known as the Eye of Light. This talisman, forged in a time long forgotten, held the power to banish the shadow of death and restore balance to the world. With the weight of the city's fate resting on my shoulders, I embarked on a treacherous journey to locate the Eye of Light. My search led me through the darkest corners of New Arcadia, where the shadows seemed to whisper my name, and the air was heavy with the scent of fear. At long last, I found the Eye of Light, hidden away in the heart of the city's most ancient and desolate building. Armed with a talisman and a newfound sense of purpose, I confronted the shadow of death in a final, desperate battle for the soul of New Arcadia. The darkness swirled around me like a living nightmare, clawing at my sanity and threatening to consume me whole. But with the power of the Eye of Light at my command, I unleashed a torrent of blinding energy that shattered the bonds of darkness and sent the shadow of death screaming back into the void. As the city awoke from its nightmare, the people of New Arcadia breathed a collective sigh of relief. The streets once again hummed with the sound of life, and the shadows that had so long held the city in their grip were banished to the corners where they belonged. As for me, I returned to my life on the fringes of the unknown, forever changed by my battle with the Unseen Stalker. For I had stared into the heart of darkness and emerged victorious, a beacon of hope in a world that was all too often consumed by fear.